I would like to kick off with Baarte, the overall skill coordinator. Baarte, can you tell a bit about skill as an introduction to this session?
Yeah, thank you, Gert-Jan, and welcome everybody. Skill is one of the Horizon projects focusing on bidirectional charging. Maybe you heard the news a little bit, but the map of the Netherlands turned red recently because of grid congestions. And fortunately enough, unfortunately, we have this congestion, but fortunately enough, we foresaw this happening, and it might also happen in other countries. So we started this collaboration not only with the best practices of the bidirectional test in Utrecht, but to make this a success to avoid congestion on the grids and also to facilitate the market for EV drivers to earn money with their vehicles. We started the Skill project almost 3 years ago. It's a cross-sector collaboration with car manufacturers such as Hyundai, Polestar, Renault involved, but also charge port manufacturers such as ABB, We Drive Solar, a lot of universities, Chalmers in Sweden, for example. And as mentioned, we try to develop bidirectional charging, but also prepare mass market rollout schemes, not only for the Netherlands, where it's really needed at the moment, but also in France, Germany, the Nordics, and even Hungary. Technical development, but also a focus on social science. Do EV drivers embrace it? So to avoid this traditional chicken and egg problem, because we know Renault and Hyundai and Polestar are bringing the vehicles to the market, we also think it's wise to proactively invest in bidirectional charging. The charger you install today must last for 10, 15 years. So in our vision, it should have bidirectional facilities. And for this webinar is started to do some lessons on joint procurement. Back to you, Gert-Jan.
Thank you, Baarte. We have created a program specifically for joint procurement and lessons learned. What we learned in Utrecht on procurement for V2G ready charging stations, and of course with the vision to potentially roll it out also Europe-wide. So in this first bidirectional webinar, cities webinar, we focus on the needs assessment. So what are also the needs in other cities and regions in Europe on V2G procurement, if they're interested to step into V2G game as well, and also connecting to each other. So it's very great that quite some cities are joining this webinar with people from Oslo, Istanbul, from Sweden, from also from Finland, and from other countries, from cities as well as from grid operators. And since that's the target group of this session, we would invite you very much to also ask your questions. You can open also your camera. You can get the access rights for that. Open your camera and ask your questions as a panelist. And other people with other backgrounds, we also value very much. We know there are a lot of experts in there as well, since we saw the attendees list. So very welcome to ask your questions in the chat, and we try to address your questions as well. So today during the session we have first we kick off with a session from Utrecht. My colleague Matthijs and Bart will present that. Afterwards, Edwin from Vier will also present. We in Utrecht we tell the story about what we did and how we did procurement on V2G. Edwin will tell more about the SCF handbook for joint procurement of charging infra, also which is already in the work in Europe. and how we can also add with V2G requirements to that. And Bart will end with also more a presentation from ELAT on the European blueprint for V2G and the open ecosystem and interoperability. Right. Okay. So why are we doing this in Utrecht? So I will step in just shortly. The V2G system offers numerous benefits, including grid stability, optimizing renewable energy usage, and especially also cost efficiency, and reducing the city's overall carbon footprint if we roll this out citywide. And of course, that requires an extensive collaboration between many actors in the chain, in the V2G chain. There are grid operators, local grid operators stayed in Utrecht, technology providers with backends, and also the aggregators, researchers from universities. In Utrecht, for example, the Utrecht University, Delft University, but also partners in the Skill project across Europe. And also, of course, residents. We do it for people driving EVs and for the city itself. So, and this comes along with supportive policies for the widespread adoption of V2G capable EVs. And we will share how we did that in Utrecht, and we would love to hear your feedback and questions on that. So, as Bart already shortly noted, that we are currently facing severe grid congestion in the Netherlands in general, but in Utrecht it might be the biggest problem of the whole of the Netherlands. So V2G, of course, can be a really great part of the solution to balance the grid. And and V2G is a potential superpower in this. This visual has been calculated by the local grid operator, and basically says if we wouldn't have any EVs, you see it on the left side. You see a picture. Then in quite a bit, some years from here, we would have problems with overloaded transformation stations. In this case, 25 transformation stations. If we would add EV to that, it doubles to approximately almost 50. If we do charge those EVs smart with a static profile, so during the peak times slower, but not really in a dynamic way, then we will actually reduce it back to sort of the reference scenario with no EVs. But if we do that smart, then there will be only 25 left. And if we add V2G to the mix, we sort of solve most of the problem. So V2G is really has the potential to also address other electrification in the system, like heat pumps, etc., and be partly a solution for that. Also, it has been calculated that Utrecht potentially could be balanced, the grid of Utrecht, by approximately 10,000 bidirectional EVs, and we have approximately 140 cars in the city. So it's a lot, but in a future scenario, it's not very durable, you could say. And also in some calculations, with publications coming up from the universities at a later moment, we've seen that charging costs could potentially be negligible or even become negative. And V2G, also smart charging, but also V2G can achieve a significant reduction of CO2 emissions. Now, why are we doing this? So now it's still a steep growth of EVs coming in the city. And next year we expect 10,000. In 5 years from now, 5 to 6 years, we expect almost 28,000 EVs. And that's why we are doing this. It has a lot of potential. But we also have the how. So,
Matthijs, can I take over here?
Yeah, great.
Do I still have the echo? No?
I don't hear you.
Okay.
No.
Perfect.
I hear the echo.
Oh, okay. Now then you keep going. You're doing fine.
Okay. Now I'll step in. Now, unfortunately, that's okay. Maybe you can add a bit with an echo. Yeah, so basically it started. This is a vehicle to grid timeline we created for another project. We added a bit to the right. It started with Robin Berg, entrepreneur from Utrecht. He started to experiment with his solar panels on schools when there were hardly any solar panels in the city, and a bidirectional charging pole and a car, the Nissan Leaf. So, and then later, shortly after Steden and the Utrecht city thought, hey, this is really interesting. What is he doing? So stepped in and try to make this happen. And Utrecht defined a special pilot area in the area of Lombok, where this experiment could go on and could be scaled up to at least a district. Now, then later on in 2018, Robin Berg's company, Bidirectional Solar, won procurement for public vehicle charging in Utrecht. And in this procurement, V2G capabilities were a bonus. So it would give in this case Robin Berg extra points in that procurement. And with that, he won this procurement, so he could roll out also to other parts of the city in an open ecosystem. But still, there were quite some issues with the development of ISO 15118, which is a very important protocol for V2G. We can go in depth about that later on or in a different session. But you see, it stepped up. So in the concession in 2018 for charge points, it was a bonus, an extra. You could earn extra points. But in the concession of 2020, with even more charge point, it was really a requirement to have V2G ready charge points. But then still, the protocols were developing. And now along the way, many milestones were met, including like first the bidirectional charging, so the discharging with the Hyundai's in the 2022, and the skill project kicked off in 2022. Another Renault also was engaged again, and Hyundai stepped in, and and now we're actually pretty close to an open system blueprint with open standards and an open network for our public charging infrastructure, which is then compliant to ISO 15118-20 and other protocols, and to be really rolled out citywide, but also potentially to other cities. Now, you can do this in different operational models. So you have a procurement model, for example, we use that in a parking garage in the city. Concession model, where we use it for public charging, curbside charge points in the city. And there's an open market model, which we now have for our sharing car fleet. And you can put V2G specifications in there, and that is what we did. I will show you how we did that. But I will also want to say at the right side of the bottom right side of the sheet, you see two so-called skill e-courses, which here we are working on, and we will be ready to check pretty soon. And there, Matthijs tells a lot about scaling up charging infra and also financing charging infra. So interesting potentially for other cities and regions in Europe. So about those V2G specs, which we put in the tender specifications, basically the most important ones we've put on in this slide here. So we there were in the program requirements, and this is the latest one we did for 500 charge points in parking garages from the municipality, open to the public. It's about a network code and a requirement for generators. Now, this is still a process which is in the work, and Baarte from ELAD will also will tell more about that in the third presentation. But also, there must be separate counters in the MID meter of the charging station. So it's important that the hardware, the charging station, has that. and the right protocols must be in place. So currently OCPP 201 is the most recent version of OCPP. So we have put that in the requirements, but actually 2.1, OCPP 2.1, which is still not finalized and will be published anytime soon, as far as my knowledge goes. We said, hey, if that's available, it needs to be updated. Chargeport needs to be updated within 12 months from the official publication. So we put that as a requirement in there. It needs to have an update within that period, so it will be ready to use. Then also 15.11.8 is very important. -20 has been published, but there are quite some pilots which are using -2, ISO 15.11-2. I see .2, but it must be -2. And actually, the -20 is also in the protocol. So it must be within the given time period, must be updated when it's officially launched. So and with that, we have created a certain blueprint. Matthijs, maybe you can shortly elaborate a little bit, even with an echo, on this.
Yeah, maybe. This is the requirements we put in the tenders. It must be noted that we got quite some questions from market parties who wanted to write into the tender.
The echo is still there, unfortunately.
Okay. You are muted, John.
Okay. Yeah, so we got quite some questions from contractors, but we've managed that with at least putting in the requirements what we could require, and others with potential updates. We work together with ALAT, and we're actually in February 2024. It wasn't completely ready, but we're really approaching a blueprint which is more or less complete. But also Bartek can tell a bit more on that, especially about the generators requirements. So so what do we have right now? Actually, we're building the bidirectional network V2G, but we're doing already smart charging V1G on a large scale. And for this, we also use the smart charging for all guide, which is also available in English on the NIAL, Dutch National Charging Infrastructure agenda site. So welcome to check it out if it's interesting for you. And what we have is we have quite some public AC V2G, public charge points. It's good to underscore that we are AC. And there are a lot of charge points which are V2G ready, but not yet -20 compatible, but they are V1G ready, and we're rolling out V1G on that. So and actually in the upcoming years, in the newest concession where the right specifications were in, we expect to have 2,000 extra V2G -20 curbside charge points in 3 years from now. And also 500 V2G -20 charge points in the public parking garage, which I just mentioned. And we also have companies in the city like ASR company, and close to the city, Triodos company, who have a lot of V2G charge points. Also coming from We Drive Solar. So what did we learn from some smart charging and V2G pilots with our partners? Bart, would like to invite you to tell more on this. Are you ready?
Yes, everybody. Do I have an echo as well? Then maybe Gert-Jan, in the chat, there's a tip for you to share the screen, not the sound. So maybe try before I continue.
Yeah, there's a good recommendation to try to turn off your sound. So not your microphone, but the sound, the output of the computer.
I think it's better now. Ah, so we know who was to blame. Yes, okay. Good. So sorry everybody for that. Hello everybody, this is Bart van der Rey, also, well, deeply connected to the Utrecht bidirectional system, ecosystem as it's sometimes even called. I have a few slides for you to present some research results on what has been going on in Utrecht in terms of what is the grid impact, the impact on the electricity grid of the smart charging and the bidirectional charging that is progressing in Utrecht, and what is the use for the city of that. It's just a few slides, and the first one is actually not about V2G, but it is still nice to show, I think. It is one of the scale actions measuring several hundreds of smart chargers in Utrecht under different scenarios. And the conclusion is that if you look at the peak demand, which is always in the evening hours, of course, of charging of cars, you can see that smart charging, if you take regular smart charging, which means you reduce the power, you don't pause the charging, you don't switch off the charging, but you reduce the charging power until 6 ampere, you can save about 20% roughly in the evening hours on the grid load. And when the grid load is lower, the cars can charge faster again and be full in the next morning. If you add full post charging, so go back to 0 ampere temporarily, that increases to about 30%, which is significant. And it's also good to say that the way it is done in Utrecht is in a soft way, in such a way that only regular customers are recognized by the system and are reduced or are paused completely. Incidental users, visitors, will have more power to their car in order to be able to go back home in the evening. Can I have the next slide, please? Now to vehicle to grid. We still have to do with calculations. By the way, all these calculations are made by Utrecht University and the Technical University of Delft, partly in the framework of the national project called Robust, which is collaborating with Scale. On this slide, I would like to invite you to especially look at the right-hand figure for the residential chargers. Here, the question was, can we, in the Netherlands, if we want to provide flexibility, there are several systems, and the most important systems have a threshold of this slide is a calculation by Utrecht University on if you want to provide 100 kilowatts of flexibility on the electricity grid using smart charging chargers and vehicle-to-grid chargers. How many would you need to do that reliably? And the right-hand figure shows you that if you have smart charging chargers, you would need about 200 of them, 150 to 200, in order to reliably produce a redispatch of 100 kilowatts in the evening hours. Well, that's okay. We are already experimenting with that on the Dutch grid congestion platform, GoPax, with 300 chargers. And yes, we are seeing that it is possible. The dotted lines are with vehicle to grid. So what you see there is that if you want to provide the same amount of flexibility, you would need only like 75 or 100 vehicle to grid chargers to provide that amount of redispatch. A sign that vehicle to grid is really has a lot more impact per charger on the grid than only smart charging. Can I go to the next slide? Thank you. Then maybe I should speed up a little bit, but
Yeah.
this is another picture that essentially shows the same. A calculation for chargers for shared cars, where the question was asked, if you look at a small group of chargers, what will be the average charging power in the morning hours on the left side of the figure and the evening hours on the right side of the figure? For unoptimized charging, so that's the left bar, so it's a few kilowatt, about 2 kilowatt per charger on average, which is the load which will be put by the charger on average on the grid in the evening hours. The middle bar is for just smart charging, unidirectional smart charging, so it goes to almost 0. And then the green bar is for bidirectional charging. What you see is that the power could be negative for a period of 3 hours in the evening hours. So a vehicle-to-grid charger can be used to help the grid cope with the evening load.
And Bart, good to know that this is based on real data, right? On real data profiles coming from the shared car fleet in Utrecht from My Wheels with our solar. Yeah.
It is vehicle-to-grid is not fully operational on a large scale yet. So this is a calculation. It is based on usage data
exactly.
of cars, but it is a projection into the future. So yes, the practice may turn out a little bit tougher than this. Still, it shows that vehicle-to-grid has a different order of potential than only smart charging.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Now maybe you should switch on sound sharing.
Yeah, I don't think we need the sound sharing. But
okay, so go ahead.
Yeah, what you see here is we're working on an integrated EV planning EV and mobility tool. So basically, it's a transformer load simulation tool where we can do all kind of scenarios with different EV adoption rates, with different adoption rates from heat pumps, for example, different adoption rates for solar PV, and it's all based on and connected to real world data from the transformation stations. So we can do different kind of scenarios into the future with different policies and different adoption rates and see what the load on the transformation station then will be with uncontrolled charging, V1G smart charging, V1G smarter charging, like with pulse charging or with V2G charging, and we see what the effect will be. So and we will go in depth on this tool in the next on the second bidirectional city event in November, hybrid. So it will be in Budapest, but also you can join online, and we'll tell you more about this and what we've calculated and what the results are for this. So basically that's a story. We probably have quite some questions. Very welcome to ask specifically people from cities and grid operators. Very welcome to also ask your questions by with audio here. Pedro can give you access rights or put them in the chat and also, if we can't address it during this webinar, we can come back at you later, and we can share that with the whole group as well. Our questions on that. So, Bart, do you have?
If you want, so I had the interest of availability from Mert Jamen from Kadikoi.
Yeah.
But also from the city of Helsinki. Yeah. So if you don't mind, I'm going to give both. Allow to talk so you can share a bit more of your experience.
Yeah.
So let me start. Lena, Maya, I just allowed you to talk, and Mert, do the same. So I think we can start with Lena, Maya, and then Mert. Feel free to share a bit of your own knowledge and doubts and questions. So we are here also to answer your doubts and questions.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, okay.
Am I echoing?
No, we hear you fine. We hear you fine.
Perfect. Okay, so hi, I'm Leena Majakimari from Helsinki, city of Helsinki. I work in the climate unit, and I work with EV infrastructure mainly, and some traffic climate related issues. This V2G system is relatively new for us, and I'm actually stepping in for sort of colleague of mine, Raimo Tengvall, who was supposed to be here. He works in Forum Virium, which is our innovation group, basically owned by City of Helsinki. Yes, I would have so many questions, but I'm not sure yet how to form them. We are aiming to be carbon neutral by 2030 and carbon negative from 2040 onwards. So we have a lot coming on this field. And of course, as a small country, Finland is relying heavily on our neighbors for electricity. And right now we cannot really look to east because we cannot really deal with Russia. And that's maybe one issue why we are slightly concerned with our electricity grid and why we need to maybe find new solutions to make that supply good enough for the future when we're supposed to have more EVs in our traffic. We'll be having two projects oncoming. E-cargo is one of them, and then there was one maybe some of you have heard from. It's called e-Power Move, which is part of Horizon Europe project.
Yeah.
And Helsinki will be one of the 3 pilot cities in that one. I'm sorry, Raimo isn't here. He could tell you more about this, but if you have any questions, please do contact me or him so we can tell you more.
So then, yeah, what are the plans in there, and what questions or barriers are there? It's interesting to share. Yeah. So what are the plans in the project on V2G and smart charging maybe, and what questions do you have?
Well, we haven't really tried any V2Gs yet in Helsinki, so it's all relatively new. We have this residential area and office area in Helsinki with 1,200 charging spots. So we're planning on trying the V2G there. But we haven't really gotten there yet because it's starting in January. So I'm not really sure what to ask yet, but I'm taking any tips what to take into consideration.
Okay. Now we thought you would have a question, I think, but as I understand, you're starting up. So now along the process, we were fully welcome to check in with us and join us in this program, so we can might travel along with you in this.
Yes, I think one of our biggest issues so far has been because this is a relatively new technology, and in Finland we have rather strict legislation with basically everything, and our electricity group has been a bit concerned about data and the safety of the data and how to how should I put this, how to manage all this information that is needed to the system. So I think that would be an interesting issue.
Yeah. To take up maybe a later time. I think it's I know also from other cities like Kadıköy, Istanbul. You're also working on a V2G project. Mert, you are also on the call, right?
I'm here. Hello, I'm Mert. I'm a urban planner and project manager. I'm mostly manage most of the mobility projects and also some of the electrification related projects. Our efforts are more on the because it's a small scale effort, but Kadıköy it's only a district of one of the 39 districts of Istanbul, but it's one of the central ones, so it has 500,000 population and it's 100% pedestrianized. We have many charging stations in our inside our grid, but they are not directly connected to the to our administration. Now we are in an effort to implement charging stations and on street charging parking spaces. But now we only have 20 of our own, but we are in an effort for a lot more. We are also in an effort. It's more like a also a disaster relief project, which V2X scenario will work for us. We are in a collaboration with Hyundai in an effort to create solutions in case of an emergency to provide for the various applications for life-saving applications during earthquakes. Now we are also testing in a testing phase with them, and also creating an awareness campaign for EV owners, which is the highest in Kadıköy in Turkey, by the way, to get them on board with this project and provide V2X solutions when necessary, and create small compensations for their from their costs, from their expenses, and also this could be a big opportunity for us to motivate people to use and also share the energy they have, because these are huge batteries that we could use in case of an emergency. And this type of collaboration and also the belonging, the sense of belonging, would help us get many people on board in a V2X scenario, which would in exchange affect our charging station infrastructure, and also make us create more space with the funding we generate from this small scale project. We are thinking of upscaling it as well. And also this is only besides our mass transportation efforts, electrification of the mass transportation efforts. We need a little bit fast tracking in that area as well. Now we are implementing shuttle projects in our city to compensate for the gaps in our mass transportation system. Those are also all electrified. Those will also be a part of this V2X solution. My main question would be, because we are in a learning process in this manner, at what scale we should consider using V2G solutions, because you need a particular number of specific number of users in order to create this type of service. What would be the best, because we now, as I said, it's rising very fast, the EV ownership in Kadıköy. So we are thinking of how.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I think also because of the time. But it's a very good question. So how we in Utrecht approach it. But Matthijs, are you still on the call? Okay, now how we approach it? We try to solve the chicken egg problem. So we try to prepare our network of chargers to be V2G ready, so it can take the cars whenever the cars are ready. And also in the chat already from some questions on which cars are ready. Now there are quite some cars getting ready, but for example, the upcoming Renault 5 will be AC V2G capable, but also the Kia EV9 and new Kia models, EV3 and 4 as well, as we heard, will also be capable of AC V2G. But also Volkswagen is capable of doing DC V2G. Polestar AC V2G, Volvo both AC V2G, DC V2G. But the only thing is that most of those OEMs are still on a certain protocol, like actually the -20 or sort of edited -20 protocol, and not yet on the open -20. Sorry, -20 instead of -2. Most are on -2 and then a sort of own version, and we really need an open protocol. So what we would advise you, at least it's how we approach this, is to take the open protocols, which are widely embraced in the market, and then put that in the specifications.
We are lucky to be just a small addition. We are lucky because we got into the EV era a little bit later, which creates a big opportunity for people to see this type of campaigns, this type of promotions, and use them and choose their car accordingly, which will serve also the process as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Now maybe also because of the time, we have some presentation as well, and want to also keep room for other questions. But I was wondering, Sture, you are in the call as well from Oslo, right? Are you still there, and are you maybe able to tell a bit more about the strategy you're working on, which might also include V2G in Oslo? Do you have the right to speak, Pedro?
Yes, I can allow Sture, but if he's not available, there's a lot of questions in the chat already.
Okay. Now maybe we can pick one more, Bart, and then go to Edwin in his presentation. Bart, what would you suggest?
Yeah, there are a lot of good questions, so I have to choose here. We don't have time, I'm afraid, for all of them. Yeah, so there are several questions about what about the cars? Will they become available? So you gave a quick answer. I think people could contact you or Bart or others for more details of what's going on exactly, I think.
Yes. Yeah.
There are a few questions about AC and DC. Robin Berg in the chat gave an answer, but what about why AC, and will AC or DC become the standard, or will both coexist? Maybe the City of Utrecht can also give an answer to this one.
Yes, I can. Matthijs, are you there? He might.
Yes, I am.
Yes, okay, yeah.
Yeah, what we see now is that because it's on street, public charges, which is mainly AC now in the market on street, we prefer the AC V2G. The investment costs are lower for the chargers, and also the chargers are smaller because there's no inverter on street then. But for other use cases, also DC might be interesting. For instance, if you integrate PV solar behind the meter on a house or on a business, DC might be interesting as well. So I think they can coexist, but for on-street curbside charging, the AC V2G charging seems more relevant or easy.
Yeah. I hope that explains. And if you have any more questions, as we noted before, we try to address it later on after the webinar if we can't address it during this webinar. Edwin, I would like to go to your presentation.
Yes, hi.
Are you ready? Okay.
I'm ready. I will try to keep it short because what I see is that there are a lot of interesting questions on the technique and all the things around that. And I just want to give you something about what happens also in Europe on the, maybe to support these kind of questions. And that is, I hope that you can see my screen now.
Yes, we can. Yes.
That is, we are a partner in scale from Fuel Sustainable Mobility, but we are also responsible for the European Alternative Fuels Observatory, the observatory where a lot of interest and details are on the uptake of electric mobility and also the uptake of charging infrastructure. And together with DG Move, there is also this Sustainable Transport Forum that exists already for many years. But in 2020, there was a very interesting handbook that was produced with several cities all together, and also with market players around it. And also that was mentioning back then something about bidirectional charging. And in that handbook, and it looks like, I hope that I can go to the next slide. Yes. That looks like this. So there is recommendations for public authorities on procuring, awarding concessions, licenses, etc. around electric recharging infrastructure for public use. And there is a summary handbook. And we think it is interesting together with this based on scale, but also the other European projects where cities are involved around bidirectional charging, to see if we can write down a short annex related to that. And also Bart is in the call. He will explain also more about also the role of ELAT. And you have in your city as Utrecht already a lot of details about what needs to be done if you are going to procure chargers, including bidirectional options and things around it. So we think that based on the current content of the handbook, that we can set up an annex and also around electric V2G aspects in it. For example, the current content is already also looking at the things that you have in your charging infrastructure, like what is the best deployment approach of the cities and regions. Of course, you want to have a long-term mobility strategy. Important to cooperate, like you did in Utrecht. You have Utrecht as a city, but you work also together in the region around the city. That procurement process is together with the same strategy. You can also see that there is public-private cooperation in these kind of aspects. You mentioned Robin Berg, for example. This is also very important if you want to have successful rollout of your charging infrastructure, and even also cross-border. And that's also a relation with ELAT, for example, international standards around it. So all these kind of aspects are mentioned in this handbook, but it is not focusing yet on bidirectional charging. So, and also flexibility for the EV users. What's in it for the EV user if his or her car is able to discharge and be part of the network? Because I think in this case, it's also mentioned, it can also reduce the overall deployment costs if you work together also with the EV users. Then how to organize a tender procedure. Exactly that's what also you explained from Utrecht perspective. So how to cooperate, how to do the joint procurement, what kind of entities you have to select to operate and develop the right infrastructure, how to support competition in the market, and which contract models. You mentioned all the 3 contract models, Gert-Jan. Also, that is mentioned already in the handbook, and each city with their own perspective can choose how they can build up this structure and which policy instrument they use. Future-proof is already mentioned in that handbook. And within future-proof, there are 3 levels. It's about more energy-dense batteries, for example, also batteries from trucks and vans and buses. But very specific already, there was charging and smart charging and V2G mentioned in it. But there's not a lot of details around V2G in that handbook. So this is the text related to V2G. So they say already back then, public authorities should require that all publicly accessible recharging points are at least smart charging ready. Well, Utrecht now said V2G ready, and V2G is important for the future. So we think that it would be interesting, and that's today we have a first session, but there will be more sessions after this, that cities, and maybe also including DSOs in those cities, maybe it's good to set up a working group to see how we can together build up an annex on this handbook, and that it will also be helpful for cities and regions which are not so much into details of V2G yet. And they can use and they can learn from the use cases of city as Utrecht and Istanbul, and maybe also Helsinki, which are already thinking about V2G. And so the outcome can then be included as an annex in this handbook. So that's what I wanted to very shortly discuss. And maybe, if cities are interested to join and DSOs are interested to join, please send an email to Gert-Jan, and then we can organize that this working group will start working together, and we can manage to set up this annex. That's what I shortly want to explain to you. But I think it's more about the content and the discussions, which is interesting to talk about now. But this can be a helpful tool around that.
Yeah, thank you, Edwin. Yeah, so So basically, there's a lot of available already in a handbook. The requirements for V2G are not really set in there. So I would like to have a working group with a group of cities and grid operators from Europe to really write this. And we can also use as a basis for that, we can use the smart charging requirements published by ELAT and get them a step further to really be the right requirements to add to this handbook. Potentially. So yeah, we will reach out to all cities and grid operators and other experts after this webinar as well if they want to join this. But do we have any questions on this?
If I may add one comment,
yeah.
I know I'm not attending, but at the moment, and Edwin, it's good that you mentioned the handbook. Now it's being revised. So they are preparing a new handbook, but during next year, as far as I'm aware, there's work being done on doing the whole document. So the handbook, it's something smaller. So they are preparing, I think it's ChargeUp is leading this, ChargeUp Europe is leading this together with the SDF, doing a small version, but working on a larger document, a more complete document for during next year. As part of the Sustainable Transport Forum, the subgroup of public authorities. So this could be really interesting if we can have something that can inform not just the smaller version of the handbook, but then the bigger version that's going to be published in the future. So I think in terms of timing and alignment, it's really good.
Great, Peter. So there's a lot of available, and we need also validation from cities and grid operators if that's good and if they can work with that. And what what they might miss to really take a next step in on V2G. Okay, great. Are there any questions for now from cities and grid operators or others on the? I think. Is it?
There are questions, but still technical questions related to the previous presentation.
Yeah, we'll try to address that later on after Barte's presentation. I would say, Barte, can you present now? And then we afterwards we have room for all sorts of questions.
Yes, and since I'm on the location, we agreed that you will share the screen, Gert-Jan.
I thought you would do that, but I'll do that. Just one.
Yeah, I kicked off this session on behalf of the project coordinator of Skill, and now I'll do a little bit with a presentation with a different hat, being one of the grid operators in the Skill project. I work at ELAT. ELAT is a collaboration of Dutch grid operators, DSOs and TSO. In the Skill project, we also work together with LAW, German grid operator in the Munich area, and of course our friends from Enedis, the big French grid operator. They are project partners, but of course every charger installed in the Nordics, in France, in Germany, in Hungary, in Greece has to be connected to a grid. So not partners, but we're in line with a lot of other grid operators. Yes, next slide, please. This is Mr. Draghi. He released a report a month ago, very interesting. And I added these slides to put the project a bit in perspective. Sometimes it reads as Draghi has read some deliverables of the Skill project, because his appeal is largely to continue to achieve broader climate goals, decarbonization of the industry, become fossil fuel oil independent in your energy generation, but also in your mobility. And the way forward is on innovation and collaboration, and especially standardization in Europe, because the broader competition is not between European countries, but it is between continents, between America, China, and Europe. And we're at the moment, it's not really a race, but we lack competitiveness in Europe. So we must be more innovative, and the way to do that is standardize, harmonize, and work together. Next slide, please. And well, different picture, but this is for an example in the Netherlands, part of the scale project, where you see a car charging within the background, a house with a lot of rooftop solar, and what you don't see is a heat pump inside. Becoming oil independent means we need much more sustainable generation, and bidirectional charging plays a major role here because it can add buffer capacity for the grids. In the kickoff, I mentioned that. Yeah, thank you. This is not the situation in the Netherlands. This was the situation 2 years ago. At the moment, this map is completely red, which means there's a lot of grid congestion in the Netherlands. Sometimes supply congestion. So on a sunny day, there's so much solar generation that the grid can't cope with it. At other moments, for example, at a cold winter day, there's a demand congestion because of all the heat pumps and need to heat the houses and the economic activities around it. Yeah, and as you might imagine, bidirectional vehicles play a crucial role here. In the end, I, a grid operator, must invest in my grid with new distribution transformers, extra cables, but that will take quite some time. But the short-term solution, at least that's what we're doing the research on, and what we're testing within this project, is how can the battery of the vehicle be a buffer, not only to absorb the solar energy on a sunny day, but also help the grid discharging on a cold winter day. And that is from my perspective. Maybe the next slide. I'm a grid operator, so this is a slide I like. This is cables, this is working in the ground. But many customers, fleet owners, for example, Mr. Berg from We Drive Solar, he thinks this is just a thing he can count on, and he wants to operate his business and make a little bit of money out of his parked vehicles. So when the cars are parked, maybe the next slide. Just like here, this was a prototype by one of the Skill partners, Renault, a test vehicle before they really can come on the market. This was a few years ago in Utrecht with We Drive Solar vehicles from Robin Berg on a bidirectional charger you see here in the forefront. Next slide, please. Yeah, these were the project partners, but everybody knows that. We've seen in consumer research that people are embracing smart charging under the condition that they have control. So I, as a grid operator, need their battery of the vehicle, and an energy supplier can do some energy services. But in the Skill project, we've also seen across Europe in 40 different European countries with over 3,000 respondents that people say, yes, you're allowed to do something with my battery, but in the end, I want to be able to overrule this smart charging. And we expect this will be exactly the same with bidirectional charging, because people can make money out of it, individuals, but also fleet managers, for example. Next slide. This is an example of April last year, but we had these circumstances multiple times also in 2024. It's not a daily thing, but if you look closely during the afternoon on an April, a spring day, there were negative energy prices. So there was so much wind generation, solar generation, that you were paid when you were charging your vehicle. This is, of course, not a daily thing happening. Sometimes it's just around 0 cents for a kilowatt hour during the afternoon or in the middle of a stormy night. But entrepreneurs, energy suppliers, aggregators, or individual consumers can make money off that spread. So you charge not only when there's grid capacity or a need for extra grid capacity, as I mentioned, during a sunny day or a windy night, but we must facilitate the market as well. So people are able to perform these energy services via their electric vehicles. Yeah, thank you. Then there's always a thing on, nice in Utrecht, but grid codes. So all grids in Europe are different. This is also one of the reasons behind the AC/DC conversation. In my opinion, both are good for the grid. In the long term, I agree with Matthijs that the inverter can be optimized in the vehicle. AC charging stations are cheaper, but at this moment, the first tests were often on DC, because then you don't have the issue of all different grid codes over Europe. But the good thing, in the spirit of the Draghi report, ACER, the European regulator for grids, for example, is aligning all the different grid codes. And they can do because they are not so different. Everybody is focusing on the details, but in this short presentation, I would like to say a little bit on the similarities. Next slide, please. So one of the similarities in all different grid codes, they might differ a little bit on frequency control. So you must adjust your behavior sometimes in a country when the frequency goes up to 50.2 hertz, or in another country it might be 50.3. But the idea behind it is all the same. Just like an orchestra, you must follow the rhythm of the orchestra. You must follow the rhythm, the frequency of the grid. The second similarity, next slide please, is in case of an emergency, whether you're in Germany, France, the Nordics, Hungary, or wherever, grid operators like to be able to stop when there's really an emergency. That's in all grid codes the same, but when to stop and how to stop, that might differ a little bit on historic conditions previously. A third thing, that's on the next slide, you don't have to stop every time. Constantly there are disturbances, like in the Tour de France on the sheet. Maybe a storm blows some trees on a cable, or a cable is cut during excavations, or there's a lightning strike, or a small local blackout. But the broader grid should be robust and handle with that. And that's all the same in all the different grid codes. So also a good insight for ACER to align on that. And the last similarity is it can happen, you can have a blackout. This is a typical blackout. Keep in mind the maps I've shown about the Netherlands, about the red congestion at the moment. Yes, that is an issue. There's a lack of capacity, but we don't have blackouts yet, so the grid still can cope. But when there's a blackout, my colleagues, the engineers of ELAT, of Stedin, of Enedis, of LAW in Germany, or wherever, go out to fix the cables and the distribution transformers. And there's only one danger: if you have bidirectional charge vehicles in the vicinity of where they're working and they start to discharge because they think, hey, there's a lack of energy, maybe we can help, they electrocute the engineers. So you want to have anti-islanding device, a technical device, a piece of hardware installed to protect them in case of a blackout, that you don't start discharging. And the same applies for solar panels. This isn't a new thing, but how they operate is a little bit different in every country so far. But luckily, Acer is going to align that, and quite soon we expect their report on this this fall. Next slide, please.
Bart, if you can finish within 5 minutes, would be great. Then we have some room left for questions. Yes.
Yes.
Great.
And this is a slide, of course, the appeal for Draghi was on standardization, and standardization isn't new. You must focus on the similarities, but don't overdo it, because then you will all drive a Lada or a Trabant like in the early Soviet days. There's enough room for local differences, but on certain things you must standardize and embed it in regulation. Next slide. The standardization should also be a cross-sector. This is in the test lab of Renault, where you see a vehicle, a charger, and the energy system. And that is also a new thing. Traditionally, there was vertical innovation within a company, but now sectors must collaborate. Not only different countries or different regions, also different sectors. Next slide. And this will hit the market. We're very proud to have this in the Scale Consortium. Hopefully in a few months you'll see these driving around, and then you know it has some bidirectional functionalities developed in the Scale project underneath. But we also do this with Polestar and Hyundai. Next one. If you're interested in what to do, how you can roll out interoperable hardware, feel free to reach out to us or check the Scale site. This is report D.5, where there are recommendations for hard and software to bring in the tenders, which Katja mentioned. Next one. And of course, we're testing. It's not just fantasy. We're testing all this in our lab and the other labs at JRC and Enedis. And then I think I come to the conclusion. Is there a last slide? Yeah, this is some policy recommendations. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Bart. Thank you very much.
Let's check the chat if there are some questions.
Yeah, if I might join in.
Yeah, of course.
I was reading the chat and there are several questions, but I think, Bart, it's good to speak a little bit more. There are several questions on interoperability, how to ensure that cars and chargers will start talking the same language in a better way, and Scale is doing a lot on that. So can you spend a few words there, maybe?
Yeah, standards and protocols are important here. So the language, it's mentioned 15.11.8-20 together with OCPP 2.0.1 or even 2.1. And the sooner you implement that as a car manufacturer, charge point operator, or backend, the better. But you as a municipality also can play a part by mandating this. And you don't have to do this from scratch. So tomorrow, because then you might bring your existing equipment in, say, Helsinki in problem. But if you put a dot on the horizon, say in 2 years, I want you to align with these standards and protocols. And after that, we probably know there will be new versions of these standards and protocols. Give an incentive to your local charge point operator, charging infrastructure, maintenance partner, to be up to standard. So that is one way. And of course, it's quite easy to standards and protocols such as OCPP are about software, but also on hardware. We don't have a commercial incentive here in the Netherlands. So try not to reinvent the wheel everywhere, because it's also easier for tendering parties, the charge point suppliers, to not have every different tender read through it and have very different specs all the time. That won't help the market as well. If you have specific specs for, well, say Helsinki or Rome or Utrecht, bring them in a platform so you can discuss it. Is this a nice to have or a need to have or a next step in innovation? Does that answer a little bit of the question?
Yes, maybe there's an aspect that is very close to it that I see, I think also 2 times. I think 2 times there's a question in the sphere along the line, do we need to comply to future regulations in order to be able to start tendering out V2G chargers?
Yeah, you don't have to at this moment because it's future regulation. But I think it's very wise. The charging infrastructure you deploy today lasts for, say, 10 or 15 years. And you don't want to have chargers installed today when you know, yeah, in a few months, the Renault 5 bidirectional will come to the market. And yeah, then you have to overdo it, or some of your citizens won't be able to have the full potential of the bidirectional potential. So also be wise and be aware that there have to be upgrades of new techniques. There will be things we even haven't discovered yet, maybe in 2 or 5 years, which you want your charge point operator to be able to update it on a cost-efficient way, of course. So embrace that in your tendering process.
Maybe if I can add, you can choose your own path and your own speed as well. So in Utrecht, we started with a certain area, which was a pilot area, and then the specifications were added to the tenders, first as a bonus, later as a requirement. So yeah, you can build it up based on where you are as a city as well. And good to know that V2G ready charging points are also capable of doing advanced smart charging. So it's that's plus.
And what you also did quite smart, in my opinion, in Utrecht, is that you're open for upgrading your infrastructure if you want, but you must do it after there are, I think it was 5 commercial available vehicles. So it's not that with the first market introduction, everything has to be changed. No.
No, of course, the market needs to be ready and not just in the first testing phase. But as we were mentioning already, also the goal of the Skill project is to create a blueprint for mass adoption. And we're approaching that blueprint. Skill project will be finished in May 2025, and now probably the blueprint will ready by then and ready to be implemented, and you can start already now with being a bit more pragmatic, but putting requirements for upgrades in the future in the tendering process. Also good to mention that. So we're telling the story from Utrecht, but we're not the only region in the Netherlands or only city in the Netherlands who is working on this. Rotterdam, for example. So Marijn is in the call as well. But also Amsterdam is working in a different way on this, and provinces in the Netherlands as well. Yeah, it's not just Utrecht. It's good to underscore, I think. Bart, do we have some other questions?
Edwin, I think, has the hand raised.
I raised my hand due to the question on the regulations, because, for example, the AFIR is natuurlijk a very important regulation, and what we expect is that it will be revised in 26. That's also what the European Commission is announcing. Always it is so, it was also with smart charging, that the regulation goes behind what is innovative. And if you are not upfront, like now, already installing V2G chargers, it can be that then you have to revise your chargers later on. That happened with dump chargers into smart charging. And we saw also, for example, on EAFO, that a lot of countries and regions were not allowed to count their chargers anymore due to the AFIR, because they were not connected smart to data. So if you want to be upfront and future-proof, like we also describe in the handbook, it is good that already now you prepare for example, that it could be that in the AFIR of 26, there will be regulations around V2G charging. So, and that's only in 2 years' time from now. So that's already very fast.
Thanks for adding that, Edwin. Yeah. Okay. More about the EFO in the chat. Bart, we have some other questions from the chat, which are interesting.
Maybe I think it would be good not to. There are a few technical questions that maybe should not be answered today, but on different meetings or in more detail. There is a question about insurance and liability, not from a city, but from a research institute, but still, it is something that Utrecht probably has considered. If anything goes wrong with somebody using a bidirectional charger, who is responsible for the incident?
Question. Matthijs, are you still on the call?
Yeah, maybe I can step in here. My last slide. Yeah, grid operator. My last slide was about the testing facility, and yeah, you never can be 100% sure. Just as I can't say there won't be power outages in the next 24 hours. But in the ELAB test lab and also in France and other locations, we're testing this together on safety. I didn't mention cybersecurity in the slides, but this is where we set up a whole test center. You're free to do a virtual tour, or if you're in the Netherlands, come over and we show you the 6 different tests we do. One on safety aspects, for example. So, well, there's always a story from the past in the Netherlands when a dog was peeing against a lamppost and got electrocuted years and years ago. Well, you want that not happening with a bidirectional charger, of course. So we test on this, not that we're peeing against charging stations in our test lab. But we're also testing on smart charging and what are the energy flows, what is the power quality if you do bidirectional charging, and not only on the charging station, but also the impact on the back end and the vehicles that do that.
And Bart, it's free of charge for OEMs, right? To test that in the ELAB test lab.
For everyone, yeah. Not only car manufacturers, but also charge point operators. Just for this reason, we want to take out the child diseases, the dangers, so no vulnerable equipment is on the market, and that's my organization's public interest. Of course, Utrecht and other municipalities have that as well.
Yeah. And you were mentioning the Renault 5 already in your presentation, but also ELAB published a video from Kia EV9 testing in the ELAB lab, right? It's also on bidirectional charging. So
so if you're, I think someone, let's have an example of the city of Tampere is doing a tender, and they can ask.
Freezing.
Arthur wants to. They can ask to ELAB to help them with testing certain equipment. So that's good too. Bart again, yeah. Yeah.
So, was I frozen or were you frozen?
Yeah. I think you were frozen.
Okay.
Not sure.
No, I was mentioning if a municipality wherever in Europe has done a tender, they can ask the charge point operator to bring their equipment to the ELAB test lab, have it tested, and we're not publicly announcing the test results, so it's no naming and shaming.
Yeah.
But that organization can show their proof. Yeah, we're cyber secure, we're safe, informally to the city of Tampere or Rome or Oslo, whatever.
UK, Istanbul, yeah, everybody in the horizon. Yeah, great. Okay, and so we're approaching the end of the webinar. Is there still one last question? We have 3 minutes left.
Well, actually, the last question we discussed was actually also it had a legal side. So I think it was very well answered on a technical level, but legally, is a city liable if anything goes wrong with a public charger that they procured? And well, in fact, for myself, I'm not sure if it's so much different with the bidirectional charger as for a normal or conventional charger. So I don't fully understand the question, but it was asked.
Okay, now maybe to shortly answer that. So equipment in the European Union needs to be certified, of course, also to be used, I think. And as Bart was mentioning, you can test it, but also contractors and need to guarantee that it will be safe, of course. So you can put that in your requirements. So basically, that's it sort of answered the question. But if it is a specific question, please let us know, and we try to help you with that after the webinar. All right, 2 minutes left. Thank you very much, everybody, for being present and for all your questions and for your presentations. People, Bart, Edwin, Matthijs, Bart. So we will have a new, second webinar at the 5th of November. Everybody gets an email after this webinar with more information on that, and also on questions on the feedback of on this webinar. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask. So yeah, it would be great to see you also on the second bidirectional webinar in November. And also we would like to connect also more and more with all the cities and grid operators. If you feel free to spread the information also in your network, and to approach us and work with us together on getting the right information connected, and so people can use it in, for example, their tenders, and also step in the V2G game so we can scale V2G up. Thank you very much, and we'll hope to see you in the next webinar.